Your parent was in every photo, every school play, every birthday, every dinner table, and you were still alone in that house. Not because they left, not because they didn't love you, because loving you and actually being there for you turned out to be two different skills, and they only ever had one of them. By the end of this video, you're going to understand why a parent can be present for your entire childhood and still leave you emotionally on your own. You come home upset. Something happened at school or with a friend, and you're carrying it in your chest the way kids do, too big for your body. You start to say it out loud, and by the second sentence, their face changes. Not curious, not soft. Irritated, like your bad day just became an inconvenience to theirs. You learn something important in that moment, long before you have the words for it. Your feelings are not safe to bring into this room, so you take them somewhere else, usually nowhere at all. Clinical psychologist Lindsay Gibson spent decades in practice noticing the same patterns showing up across completely different families and wrote about it in her book, Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. Her point isn't that these parents are cruel or absent or obviously failing. Most of them hold jobs, host holidays, show up to graduations. From the outside, nothing looks wrong. What Gibson found is narrower and harder to see. These parents struggle specifically with emotional closeness. Not affection, not provision. Closeness. The kind where another person's feelings need to be sat with, taken seriously, held, without being redirected back to the parent's own. So the emotional half of parenting quietly goes unstaffed, and a kid figures out fast that somebody has to fill it. Gibson has a name for the kid who fills it. She calls them an internalizer, and if this was your house, you probably became one without ever deciding to. Internalizers get good at reading moods before anyone says a word. They learn to time their bad news for when the room seems calm enough to hear it, if they bring it up at all. They become easy. Low maintenance. The kid who doesn't add to the load. There's usually another kid in these families too, one Gibson calls an externalizer, who does the opposite. They act out, get loud, force the household to notice something is wrong because quiet never worked. Both kids are reacting to the same absence. One learns to disappear into it, the other learns to demand around it. Sometimes it's not even a sibling dynamic. Sometimes it's one kid doing both jobs at different ages, quiet through most of childhood, then suddenly loud in adolescence, and everyone around them acts confused about where that anger came from, as if it hadn't been building the entire time. If you were the one who disappeared into it, you stopped bringing your feelings to the room entirely because you'd already learned what happened when you did. You didn't stop having them. You just stopped expecting anyone to help carry them. That's not resilience. That's a child doing the emotional job an adult in the house couldn't do. That training doesn't stay in the house you grew up in. You're still the one who stays calm when everyone else falls apart. Still the one people call at midnight, and still the one who doesn't call anyone back. Asking for help feels less like a request and more like a confession that you failed at the one thing you're supposed to be good at. You minimize your own pain before anyone else gets the chance to. It's fine. It's not a big deal. Someone else has it worse. You learn to say that before you learn to say what was actually wrong. And underneath most of it, a quiet, exhausting vigilance. Some part of you is always still reading the room, even in rooms that were never dangerous to begin with. It shows up in your body before it shows up in your thoughts. The tight chest walking into a family gathering, the exhaustion after a phone call that, on paper, was completely uneventful. You've been bracing for so long that bracing just feels like being awake. Here's what makes this particular pattern so hard to name, even as an adult. Everyone else seems to love them. Your friends think your parent is warm, funny, easy to be around. Extended family calls them a great parent. On paper, at a distance, in short doses, they genuinely can be all of those things. Emotional immaturity isn't a performance problem. It only shows up under real closeness, the kind strangers and cousins never actually get near. So for years, the mismatch between what everyone else saw and what you lived with became your problem to explain, not theirs. You must be too sensitive. You must be remembering it wrong. If they're this well-liked, whatever you're feeling has to be an overreaction. It wasn't. You were simply the only one who ever got close enough to need something real from them. This doesn't just sit quietly in the background of your adult life. It picks your relationships for you. You're drawn to people who need managing, because managing someone's emotional weather is the one kind of closeness you actually know how to do. A partner's mood becomes your responsibility before it's ever stated as one. You find yourself performing the exact same job you performed at 8 years old, just with a different person sitting across the table. And when you do end up with someone genuinely steady, someone who can actually hold your feelings instead of needing you to hold theirs, it can feel strange, almost uncomfortable. Not because it's wrong, because it's unfamiliar, and unfamiliar can feel a lot like unsafe, even when it isn't. It's not only romantic. At work, you're the one who absorbs a tense meeting without needing a debrief afterward. Among friends, you're the one who remembers everyone's hard week except your own. You built this skill in one room, at one address, and it just quietly followed you into every room you've been in since. Here's the part Gibson names that almost nobody says out loud. Most adult children of emotionally immature parents are still waiting. Not for an apology, necessarily. For a moment. The one where the parent finally shows up the way they never quite could. The good conversation. The one where they really see you and it lands, and something that's been missing since you were 7 finally gets filled in. You might have been waiting on that moment for 20 years through holidays that almost got there and phone calls that almost went deeper. It rarely arrives, not because you didn't try hard enough or explain it well enough, but because it was never a matter of trying. The gap was never about effort. It was about a skill that didn't get built. So you keep rewriting the approach instead. A calmer way of bringing it up. A better time of year to try. A more patient version of the conversation you've already had a dozen times. Each attempt quietly assumes the last one just had the wrong wording. Instead of confronting the harder possibility, that wording was never actually the problem. None of this makes your parent a villain. And that's actually the harder truth to sit with, not the easier one. They can be proud of you. They can love you in every way they know how. They can have shown up to everything that could be photographed. And still, none of that adds up to the one thing a child actually needs most, which is to feel like their inner world is welcome somewhere. Love and emotional maturity aren't the same skill. Your parent may have given you everything they had. It just wasn't the thing you were actually short on. Chances are, somewhere further back, they grew up in a room with the same kind of silence in it. Nobody sat with their feelings either. That doesn't undo what it cost you. It just means the room you grew up in wasn't the beginning of the pattern. It was just the version of it you happened to inherit. That's not an excuse you owe them. It's just context, and context changes what you're actually grieving. You're not grieving a parent who chose not to show up. You're grieving a skill that was never available to hand down in a family where nobody had it to give. It also means this doesn't have to be the version you pass down. The skill your parent never built is still learnable. Slower than you'd like, later than you'd like, but not closed off. That's not a tidy ending, and it isn't meant to be one. It's just the one true difference between inheriting a pattern and being sentenced to it. You weren't alone in that house because nobody loved you. You were alone because the room needed an adult who could hold what you were feeling. And somehow, long before you were ready, that adult became you. Human after all.